Well, time now for us to get into our big stories, and we're delving into three major issues. Of course, we might add a few others. We're going to be looking at the allegation, if you like, by Oliver Barker-Vormawor that he was tortured while in police custody. We've heard from him, but the salient details of what exactly transpired, because we've heard others in the system also say that you don't expect any special treatment, or that what was meted out to him, while it may not be in the very best of situations, is nothing different from what is, what pertains to other people who are held in police custody. We'll also look at the rate of unemployment, especially among the youth, aging 15 to 35 years. Over the last 3-year belt, 2017 to 2020, we've had an average of 9% per the statistics from here that we've been given. That has risen sharply to 19.7%, an increment of about 118% when you make the comparative. We're going to be exploring that situation as well, and also take a look at the utility companies, both the Ghana Water Company Limited and the Electricity Company of Ghana, calling for more when it comes to service charges or tariffs. What will happen in these harsh economic times? We'll bring you details of that. We'll be engaging shortly Deputy Attorney General Alfred Yeboah, as and when he's available to join the conversation. We'll start talking about the Oliver Barker-Vormawor situation. But in the studio, let me welcome a board member of Parliament for Tamale Central, Murtala Muhammad. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You always start, like this is a bit, and then you walk up and start punching. Start giving us, jobs here and there. But
so
before we connect with Yeboah, the Deputy Attorney General, I want your quick take because we'll come back to it as well. This whole bit about torture, the allegation by Oliver Barker-Vormawor. Have you listened to him?
Yes, I listened to him on Joy yesterday. I think your 5:30 news,
right.
And I think it extended to 6 p.m. news, and I was shocked.
You were shocked?
I was shocked if what he said is true. We are in a democracy, and we expect some level of professionalism by security agencies, more so the police.
Right.
If someone, commits a crime or allegedly commits a crime, there is nothing wrong with the law dealing with the person. But the laws of the state also spells out how such a person should be dealt with.
Right.
The person is not guilty until he or she is proven guilty.
In this instance, we're talking about a charge of treason felony. That's the highest.
It's a charge that can only be established by a court of competent jurisdiction. Even a murder, you charge someone for murder, the evidences you have will prove whether the person indeed engaged in the murder or not. So it doesn't matter what the charge is. Even if a person is pronounced guilty, assuming that the gentleman was pronounced guilty and he was under police custody, it is criminal for you to engage in the kinds of acts he alleged that the police or the security agencies engage in.
What specifically got you this concern? Because if it's the bit about the number of inmates in there, he talks about that where he was not fit for humans and all of that. But these are the same conditions we have in other prison cells across the country. If it has to do with feeding, at a point he was on a hunger strike and all of that. I mean, where lies that bit about torture, so to speak?
We are making these discussions on the basis of the fact that everything he said indeed happened. So if those things happened, I don't think that any other inmate, including himself, deserves that. So he perhaps will be talking for all those who have gone through what he has gone through. He has the platform. He has the opportunity to make these points very clear. For all you know, several people have been going under such inhuman treatment in the hands of the security services, but because they do not have the platform as he has, and that is why he is making this point, and everybody is giving it some attention. So I think that we need to be looking at the allegation and establishing the fact that that allegation is true or not. If it is true, we all need to collectively do something about it. I was particularly disappointed when I listened to the Deputy Minister for the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, outrightly saying that it's not true because perhaps the information he got from the security services, without a scintilla of investigation. I expect government officials.
There are those who have said that. I mean, I've heard, I don't know whether it was Professor Jimobodi. I may be wrong, so do not quote me on this one. But I've heard people, academics and others say, the Facebook posts and all of that, they were not enough for you to have gone hard with the full force of the state like we did. But the other side of the coin is you can never tell. Someone may supposedly start like this, and you think, oh, it's just one of those things, and then boom, it's in your face. So, two sides to the coin.
I think what is significant is the kind of information they had. If their information is certainly based on the Facebook, for me, I tell you, then it speaks huge levels of unprofessionalism from our security services. Someone who intends to do coup would know very well, having posted this on his Facebook, traveled from wherever he was, and then came to Ghana. It simply doesn't make sense. And this is not someone who is unintelligent. He's a very sharp guy. He's a student, I'm told, at Cambridge. Is that not the case?
That is.
A PhD student,
right,
who certainly would have known the consequences, assuming he knew that he was going to stage a coup. So I think that for me it was just, if you want to go by the kind of comments that people have made in this country, comments that could have plunged this nation into chaos and anarchy, nothing happens to those people. And I think that I agree with the professor and others who think that a Facebook post should not. You see, the police and the security services should not just be reacting to anything that anybody posts on Facebook. If they were to do that, I believe that every day would have citizens of this country.
But it's not about the tone of what he says. It's not about, on the back of this, I'm just paraphrasing, it's been a while, on the back of this e-levy cake and all of that, I mean, I would start a coup myself, stuff like that, and the useless armed forces and all of that, and he goes on with a few things. Even those who are representing him have said that his words were in poor taste, but though they are not tantamount to treason, felony, and the charge that he had been hit.
Maybe he would explain further what he means by staging a coup. Someone can say, I want to stage a coup, but not necessarily in the literal meaning of coup as in toppling a democratically elected government. I don't think that we need such, and I agree with those who think that if he meant what he said or wrote on his Facebook, of course we need to discuss, but I really don't think that he meant a coup. And the reason why I'm making this statement is that he's a very smart guy, having made this statement and knowing very well that it became a subject for discussion in this country. He would just get up from the United Kingdom, travel to Ghana, knowing very well that the security agencies were well aware of the post he had on his Facebook. If he meant
in fact, from what I gather, he was aware that there were moves to arrest him at the airport, but he still came.
Exactly. So he came. I really don't think that he really meant coup. Look at the kitchen knife coup too. This government seems to be rushing and running for everything. We are not saying that when there is real intention by citizens to engage in coup, they should not be arrested. But you don't need anybody to tell you that that certainly was not the real intention of this gentleman. And for me, that is another discussion we can have. I think the focus should be on the treatment he alleged he was given by the security agencies. And let us not just look at him as a person. Because I've heard others who are saying that he shouldn't think that he will be treated differently from others. Those others they treat that same way, is it acceptable? Absolutely no. It is not acceptable to treat citizens that way, particularly when they are not convicted for committing any crime. When they are allegedly, or when they allegedly commit a crime, pending a proper institution to establish whether they committed the crime or otherwise. And I think that we need to look at them in that perspective. Your station, you have had several reportages about people who felt that they were treated, unfairly, in some circumstances that is unacceptable by law in this country, by law enforcing agencies. And I think that we need to condemn such act. My disappointments in the deputy minister was when he condemned and said it's not true because the security agencies perhaps told him that it wasn't true. I think that as a minister or a deputy minister of state, to a ministry such as Minister of Justice and Attorney General, and a lawyer too of several years of practice, I thought that sometimes our comments should be measured until investigation is conducted to establish or otherwise. If you come out and say that it never happened and institute an investigation, and the investigation says that indeed it happened, the gentleman was treated in the, the manner he claimed he was treated, what then will you do as a minister? You need sometimes to be very careful. I remember when we were at the Ministry of Information, myself and Felix as deputy ministers, and we're doing this daily briefing. It was Honorable Ayaraga who was supposed to do it, and I suggested that no, allow us to do it so that when we make mistakes, you can come and correct. But if you, the minister, you do it and make mistakes, you will not be able to correct. I was concerned about the kind of statement you will make as a minister of state, this case, a deputy minister. I think that he could have allowed that statement to be made by party boys and not he as a deputy minister for Justice and Attorney General.
Well, we hope to get more details of that when it comes to, this entire development when it comes to allegations of torture and all of that. In the meantime, like we see in Republic Press today, he's been saying, and in his interaction, he speaks about the fact that he is better, he is stronger. There was the attempt weeks back to make a donation to the Ashaiman police station. Of course, there are processes to follow that he didn't. But let's quickly look at some other dimensions. Let me go over Zoom and have an interaction with Alfred Tuayabua, Deputy Attorney General, right here in Ghana. Senior, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Good morning, my brother.
It's a pleasure having you. I'd just like to find out, you've heard of the allegations of torture by Oliver Barker-Vormawor. He talks about the room where he was kept. He talks about interactions with the police. He talks about, of course, the circumstances in there. The place was crawling with all sorts of vermin, mice, cockroaches, and everything, and the rest. What is your quick take on his allegation of torture?
Thank you very much. I've listened to him, and he's talking about torture. And my concern has to do with his concentration on torture. Because if we take our constitution, there are provisions on torture. Ghana is also a state party to an international convention on torture. Torture, as we all know, is an intentional infliction of harm or something untoward towards a person with the intention that that person will come forth to some form of proof. From what I've heard from Oliver, he has not given any details as to how he was intentionally malhandled or mishandled or maltreated with the intention that he may come out with some form of proof. What I've heard him say is respect to how the conditions in our cells are. And if you have conditions in our cells, could it be said that you were singled out for that treatment? I'm not endorsing a situation where we have bad conditions in our cells or prisons. There is a need to improve on our conditions. But when you come out to say that you were tortured, I expect that you give the particulars and details of the torture.
Which we've been told eventually will get some more scope on. But I know that per our law, and I know you quote the aspect of our 1992 Constitution, which borders on this, tied to what the United Nations says, and I just want us to situate it. For the purposes of this convention, and I'm reading what the UN document says, the term torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed. So if we go beyond the physical dimensions, we may not have heard him say that he was physically assaulted or anything of the sort, but mentally, emotionally, is it possible that he could have been tortured?
Torture, as really stated, entails both physical and mental. if he's talking about mental torture, he should tell us the intentional conduct on the part of state actors to subject him to such a mental torture. For instance, if he was kept in a room, an isolated room, infested with mice, mosquitoes, and all those I've spoken about, then we say, oh, I was singled out for this kind of treatment. Then he may be talking about having been made to undergo through this kind of tortious act on the part of the police. But so far as I'm concerned, and what I've listened to him say, I cannot endorse or confirm his act of torture until he comes out with the particulars of the torture. Thereafter, we can interrogate it.
But you do agree with me that when it comes to mental torture, it would be pretty difficult for him to substantiate it. You agree, right? Because this is not physical. It's not like a marking you can see on your body. It's not pain that we can quantify or determine. So maybe I want you to look at it from the angle of what would be the requirement, the high requirements in such an instance to prove mental torture. What does our law say?
Yes, you can have instance of mental torture where there's an intentional conduct on the part of state actors to subject you a certain form of activity which affects you mentally. For instance, do interrogation. You are placed in a room for 24 hours, nobody is speaking to you. Certainly, it will have some impact on your mindset. Or you are placed in a room where there's loud noise, loud sound for about some minutes or some hours. Certainly, it will have some form of effect on your thinking. Or you are told to remain in a room where there's total darkness, very dark, nothing else, you don't see anything. You are there and it's like you are in hell. So there's a possibility of you proving with evidence that whatever you went through amounted to a mental torture. But if you are in a cell with other inmates, you go about what you're supposed to do. You sleep, for example, even on the bare floor. The room that you are in with other inmates is infested with cockroaches, mosquitoes, etc., etc. That may amount to some form of treatment that you think you deserve not to have been taken through. But that will not amount to mental torture from my point of view.
Right.
As I said, let's wait for him to come out with his details or particulars of torture.
Right. When you look at the conditions in our police cells generally across the country, don't you think, I mean, when you consider the fact that sometimes so many people are crammed, I think he mentions that 13 people were crammed in the cell meant for 4 people. He talks about the vermin in there. He talks about the poor quality of food, for which reason he tried to make what has been termed an illegal donation to the Ashaiman police station. Do those not border on torture? Not anybody assaulting you, but intentional emotional torture?
I think it may amount to inhuman treatment.
Inhuman treatment?
Inhuman or degrading treatment. I'm not here to say that all is well with ourselves and with our prisons. We need to do a whole lot of things to reform the conditions in our prisons and our cells. Take it, if you are kept in custody and in this weather where it's very warm and there's no fan, and there's no window, if there's the window, the window is even closed, definitely you go to some form of treatment that you may not want to. But the fact that you've undergone that treatment should not be taken to mean that you were singled out for that. We need to look at the situation. I agree with Oliver. If he went through such a situation where total, as I said, a room infected with mosquitoes and other things, then perhaps you should also join the campaign to have the reform in ourselves, in our prisons. And on this note, let me commend institutions like the Church of Pentecost that has taken it upon itself to build a prison. At least we expect such things to be happening due to constraints when it comes to financial resources. And you may have the conditions in the prisons and the cells that nobody likes, but we need to improve upon it.
Right. Let me just find out from you. Now, he had cause at a point to even embark on a hunger strike because of how he claimed he was being treated. And let's also look at when the bail conditions were, set and all of that, and he was meant to be released. It took an extra day. In fact, officials who should have been a part of the process all of a sudden supposedly couldn't be found. He went through more, just expecting, just when you feel you're going to be let go of, at least granted bail, then you're kept back in prison, in police cells and all of that. When you look at this thread, would that on any level constitute torture?
Unfortunately, no. Every legal practitioner has gone through this process before. I'm not saying that that's the best process. Where you have a client having been admitted to bail with justification. And before your client is released, the investigator will require that, one, he takes a look at where the surety lives. Two, if it will justify landed property, the property must be inspected. Three, that property must be valued to ensure that the amount on it tallies with what the court is expecting the surety to post. Then four, in some instances, the police will have to go to the Lands Commission to conduct a search, especially when you have documents on the land at Lands Commission, to see whether indeed the person who claims to be the owner of that property is actually the owner. So lawyers day in, day out go through such processes. Before becoming the deputy AG, I went through similar process with my clients. But that's the process. We can perhaps fast track it. But what he went through is not something new. We may want to reform that one. Is there a state where you can have a document where you press of a button, you can get everything? Let's look at that. In terms of his hunger strike, it is right to go on a hunger strike. Nobody can fault him for that. It will be an issue only when someone tells him that we will not allow you to eat. But respect to his right to go on hunger strike, I think nobody can fault him for that.
The law, whether you're talking about the UN conventions or statutes or our own 1992 Constitution, speaks about intention, how it must be intentional, infliction of these. So if, for example, just for the sake of education, if it could be proven, and I'm just saying this hypothetically, not alleging anything, that whichever officers should have granted him bail or who should have done certain things in the process intentionally made themselves unavailable so as to keep him in custody. Would that constitute torture in any way? Now that there's the intention, I just want that for clarity.
To me, if after he was granted bail, the officers in charge decided to go through a due process, and from his point of view, that due process was not the right thing to be done, he can bring it up. But that will not amount to torture.
So as far as I hear it from you, all that Oliver has said up to this point, unless he adds up to the information he's given us, from what we can glean, his accusation or allegation of torture has no standing, no grounding in our law.
As at now, from what he has given, there is no basis to conclude that he was tortured.
All right, maybe my final bit to you, I'll just have Honorable Murtala come in briefly, and then that is if he has any questions for you, and then we can wrap it. But my final bit to you. So Oliver, on the back of, he is alleged to have had some meetings with some big wigs in the current administration, and then he decided to do the Facebook Live thing. He was cautioned against certain things, but he decided to go ahead by his lawyers, but he went ahead with that bit. Do you feel that by speaking this much or putting out details of some of what happened, he is unnecessarily antagonizing, the powers that be, and maybe complicating his own situation, looking at the charge of treason felony that hangs over his head?
I think his lawyers should be the best persons to answer this question. He's represented by lawyers. He's also a lawyer. And he knows what he's supposed to do. He knows what he's supposed to say. But from our side, in terms of prosecuting in court, this statement that he's made has nothing, in fact, the statements have nothing to do with what he's doing in court. It's without prejudice. He's stating a point. when we go to court, we deal with evidence.
Right.
And this is a post facto matter. So this one, from our point of view, is not going to change anything.
But if you were his counsel, what advice would you have given him?
Oh, well, perhaps if he offers my legal fee, I will advise him. Now that I don't take legal fees, I'm able to advise.
Right. Okay. So, Sidia, just hold for us for maybe some 2 minutes. I want some quick reactions from Murtala, the Member of Parliament for Tamale Central. He's in the studio. Maybe just a quick reaction, and we can take it from there.
Well, first and foremost, you don't expect him to tell you that it was a torture, because yesterday he made it very clear that the gentleman didn't have any basis for the claim of torture. When you ask him, he went to talk about the fact that there is a UN convention which we are signatory to and our laws. And in defining what constituted torture, he interestingly avoided the mental torture. He interestingly avoided the mental torture until when you read to him what the UN says, then he then says that no, Oliver didn't provide any evidence. What other evidence does he need to be provided to establish that there was a torture? Two,
but the accusation of torture is not one that you can take for granted. So you would need a very
who,
sound basis to determine.
Then who establishes it? Is it the person who feels it, or the Deputy Minister for Justice and Attorney General? So that is one. He initially said, when he defined it. You didn't even ask him to define what constituted torture. He avoided the mental aspects of the torture. Two, he also said that if it is established that he was not singled out for that treatment, he alleged that it cannot constitute a torture. You remember he made that statement too. It doesn't matter whether he was singled out or not. The point is that if he was put in a room with others, which was either cockroaches or mosquitoes infested, and he felt being tortured mentally, that can only be established through some processes. Now, for him to just say that he doesn't think that the gentleman was tortured, I didn't expect him to say anything different from what he said yesterday. Another very important point, he said that it can be, he sees it as inhuman treatment. What is the difference between inhuman treatment to a torture? Based on how the person feels. You can treat me inhumanly, and I won't feel tortured, but someone can feel tortured. It has to do with the mental state and the feeling of the person. And for the avoidance of doubt, the gentleman feels he was tortured. We don't know the trauma he went through as a result of the conditions that he was subjected to. So that would have to be established by processes. Okay. So for the Deputy Minister to say, I don't think that he was tortured, I didn't expect him to say anything different from what he said yesterday.
All right. So I'll have you, Alfred Tuah, give your quick reaction. And when Honorable Murtala was talking, it also brought to mind, I mean, in law, necessaries. What may constitute necessaries for someone? Maybe luxury for another person, and not necessary. So I think that may be what he's drawing, some lines through that. For him, this may have constituted torture. Maybe a quick reaction, and then we shall cap it off on that.
All right, thank you very much. Honorable Murtala said, listen to me yesterday on your network. If he actually did, he realized that in my definition yesterday, I added the mental side.
No, you said he wasn't tortured. That's what you said. You
this
said
morning,
it wasn't true he was tortured.
I gave a definition, and my memory serves me right. I ended up whether physical or mental. So that one is something that is beside the point. Number two, the use of torture is different from inhuman treatment. Honorable, if you take the long title of that convention, I think the host has that long title. You have torture, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. So if you want to situate your matter on torture, please let us know that. Number two, if you take our Constitution, Article 15, Clause 2, there's a fine distinction there made 2A and 2B. The 2A is about torture, and the 2B is about inhuman or degrading treatment. So you can't mix up the two.
So it is the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. All of that is in
that is it. Right. That is it. That is it. Then if you look at, he's saying that the Deputy Minister, I'm defending, I don't know whether the Honourable Minister wanted you to come and say, oh, what the gentleman is saying is the truth. I know that the Honourable Member has been to the women of law. At least, yeah, he has LLB. He knows the burden of proof. Who is to discharge that burden? Is it my duty as a deputy minister of state to say what the gentleman is saying is the truth? No. From the information that we have gathered, and sitting from where I'm sitting, there isn't any scintilla of evidence pointing out torture. But if he comes up with further details, we can interrogate it. Yesterday I said it, that Ghana is a democratic state. We must all do things to ensure that our democratic journey thrives. And for that matter, if there is evidence of abuse of human rights, we must come out, speak about it, interrogate it, and if need be, punish people who engage in any form of human rights abuse or the other way around. But however, if you go to the media space and you mention, you cry out torture, and then without adding anything, and you expect that you should just accept it, hook, line, and sinker, I beg to differ. It cannot be done that way. Oliver, as I said, is a lawyer. He's represented by lawyers.
Right. At
the time that he was in custody, if indeed he was undergoing through any form of torture, I think that a person like Honorable Lawyer Ampo or just Shrem, they are not mean lawyers that will say, if their clients tell them that they were tortured, they will keep quiet and not voice it out. They definitely voice it out in court. The gentleman we had in court, he was asked, are you being treated well? My brother, even if you go back and then you'll be able to say situation where Oliver had said that the police treated him well. I remember in one of the networks, I don't have it now, but if he underwent through this kind of where he slept, cockroaches, that one, if it's actually true, like I said, we need to look at how do we reform the prisons, how do we reform the cells. But that will not amount to torture, from my point of view. We need to reform it.
Right. So just to buttress your point, his case has no legs to stand on for now. Right.
As we have it now, based on what he has provided, there's no substance to his allegations.
Can I make this point?
Very quickly.
Honorable Deputy Minister, yesterday, regardless the definitions you gave, you made a conclusive statement that it was not true he was tortured. This morning, you are telling the viewing public that based on the information you have gathered, the gentleman was not tortured. Have you had any meeting with the gentleman to provide the detailed information that you yourself stated on this program that he hasn't provided the
But I think he just made mention of the fact that the data or information available to him...
From who? From the police, from the security agencies. You see, there are three sides to every story. Culture says your side, my side, and the truth. If the gentleman goes to court, and he's a lawyer, they would take the evidences he's going to provide and the evidences the police will also provide, which more or less dispute the evidence, and then have a determination. But you see, my statement before he even came on, I said, look, you are a minister of state. You ought to be very cautious when you are communicating. My expectation, and I'm not trying to tell the minister how he should, conduct his business, but my expectation was that, yes, this is a serious allegation. We will investigate it. If he's tortured, as he himself is saying that the conditions under which people are treated, we must all look at how we can reform and change those conditions. But you see, that is what I was expecting him to say. But what you just read, the UN definition of torture, it includes inhuman treatment. That's what you read. It includes inhuman treatment. And as long as we are signatory to that particular charter, there isn't any distinction, or there will be a very difficult thing to establish the distinction between what constitutes an inhuman treatment and a torture. Because what you read, constituting torture, includes inhuman treatment.
or degrading treatment.
Exactly.
Or punishment.
They all constitute torture. So if he says that the gentleman, he thinks he was inhumanly treated based on the evidences that the evidences he's providing, that may be a distinction from torture. I disagree because this definition supports the position.
All right. Honorable Chiayabua, the final bit I want you to take, I don't know whether you'd like to respond to that, but the final bit I want you to look at is about reform when it comes to not just our prisons, but those held in police custody as well, police cells and all of that. You were talking about some initiatives. I mean, I've heard of Operation Efiase, which is prison-based. I've heard of I think the Pentecostal church doing some things. What more do you feel we can do to lessen the what people have to go through when they are put in, police custody. What more do you feel we should be doing as a system to make people be treated in, for lack of better words, more humane ways?
Thank you very much. Perhaps let me respond a bit to what the Honorable said. As a deputy minister, I know how to communicate. I communicate based on the facts at my disposal. I do not chase people who have just put out some form of allegation to get the evidence from them. If the gentleman is saying that he was tortured, it is his duty to provide the details of the torture. It's not the duty of the Attorney General, for that matter, the state, to call him and get the information. There are institutions in this state that are into human rights abuses. That's his duty. As to the information that we have, I need not disclose the information we have to the honorable member. That's what I'm supposed to do as a deputy minister.
So, of course, the burden of proof is on Oliver.
That is it, exactly. Exactly.
So on what basis did he say the guy was not tortured?
The burden of proof is on Oliver, just like any criminal matter. If the state says that Mr. A has killed, Mr. A need not prove anything. It's the duty of the state to get the information, the evidence, go and prove that kind of allegation. And the reverse is also true.
Can I ask this?
If I'm talking about torture, don't expect that I will call, or the state to call Oliver and say, Oliver, come and provide the evidence where we can make a determination. What we have is not the case. It is the duty of Oliver to provide further and better particulars of his allegations. Nothing more,
Honorable Deputy
nothing
Minister,
less.
can I ask you a question, Honorable Deputy Minister?
You can.
Is it not also the duty and the responsibility of a Minister of State, such as the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, to ensure that citizens' liberties are protected at all costs, even citizens who are accused for having been engaged in anything that is treasonable? Don't you think that it is your responsibility to be concerned about the torture of a citizen of this country in the hands of security agencies? So your statement is suggestive that it is we against Oliver. My point is that regardless what Oliver allegedly indeed, the crime he allegedly committed, which is to be established anyway, don't you think that you have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that a citizen of this country, regardless any allegation made against him by anybody, that such a citizen's liberty should be protected, and under no circumstance should he be, tortured as he's claiming?
I agree with you that it is the duty, my duty, it is your duty.
So what is this business of Oliver has to prove?
Hold on. It is my duty, it is your duty to ensure that citizens' rights are protected. If a citizen says that he has been tortured, he must provide further and better particulars of that torture.
So even before that, you said he wasn't tortured.
For example, if you go to your Facebook page, and then you say, oh, the state has done A, B, C, D, Z, then we expect that the following morning, the state should be invited to get a particular. Then in that case, the state can never run. You can have millions of people who go to your Facebook pages and be posting all manner of stuff. It is our duty to ensure that people's rights are protected. If Oliver is able to come up with further details that show that indeed he was tortured, nobody will sit down and defend such a thing. But as I speak now, and with what we have now, there isn't the slightest evidence of torture. Perhaps he comes back later, and there's evidence, we match it against others, and the state comes to the conclusion that he was tortured. We will go for it.
Honorable,
now,
right.
Repeat.
Oh, last one, I beg you. Last one, I beg you.
This has to be the final one.
Yes, I need. Honorable
one.
Deputy Minister, you arrested the gentleman on the basis of what he posted on Facebook. You arrested him because he wrote something on. Yes. You are now telling us that that same gentleman is making an allegation, a very serious allegation of torture on Facebook. And then you claim that if you want to be reacting to what people put on Facebook, then the state cannot run. This is something that borders on someone's liberty, his freedom. That it borders. It's a very serious case. So if you could arrest him...
You are missing this point.
No, you said, Honorable Deputy Minister, You said,
Now,
let me make myself clearer. You said that he wrote it on Facebook, and that your own words. If you want to be going after what people write on Facebook, then the state cannot run. And I'm saying that he was arrested on the same medium. Now, if you deemed it fit to arrest him on the basis of what he put on his Facebook page, why don't you think that it is equally important, in fact essential, to investigate a matter of a torture by security agencies whose comfort are provided by our taxes? Then you tell me that if you want to go after it, then the state cannot run.
All right.
Let me
so that'll be the final point.
All right. The final point I want to respond to is that if you post on your Facebook page matters bordering on criminality, the state will not sit aloof and allow you to go scot-free.
Torture also border on criminality.
Matters, I'm not saying torture. Maybe listen
I'm
to
saying
them.
yes, torture, alleged torture.
Oh, my brother, hold on. Matters bordering on criminality, the state agencies will have to investigate. Torture is something about fundamental human rights you complain about. And where do you complain? You lodge your complaint before the appropriate state institution for the matter to be investigated. But if it's about crime, the state don't have to take it up. I just want you to have it clear. If you post anything that suggests that you are engaging in a criminal conduct, the state will pursue you. If you post something to the effect that you are being tortured by the state, it is your duty to report it to the state for the state to investigate. As simple as that.
Honorable, we're immensely grateful for your time. I mean, I really appreciate the education that you've given all of us. Of course, some people also disagree with some of the points you make, but we'll be waiting in the coming days to see what further evidentiary, proof, if you like, that Oliver would put forward and see how the system reacts to those. But we're so grateful for your time, sir. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And that is Alfred Tua Yeboah, a Deputy Attorney General. You still have some reactions, maybe in a minute or so.
My point is that, look, your definition of torture by the United Nations Charter for me suffices. The gentleman is the only person who can establish or otherwise that the conditions that he was kept amounted to a torture.
But hold on.
I'm coming.
Hold on. The point too is that if you want to establish torture, which is a grave offense, you would have to. It would have to be backed by
if you allow
crucial evidence. And the point I'm making is we can't just listen to one side. That is why in law we say audi alteram partem. You have to listen to the other side.
I agree.
Else, if we implicate the other side too, without the necessary evidences,
that is not what I'm suggesting. If you had allowed me to finish. So for him to make such an allegation, and a minister of state whose comfort is provided by our taxes come without the full story and said that he wasn't tortured, I was expecting him that he would have gone back the words he used yesterday. Even today, this morning, you realize in defining torture, he avoided the mental aspect. And he did that for a reason. Now, I was expecting him to say that, look, it's a very serious allegation. We will investigate it to establish the truth or otherwise. Now, without any investigation, he made his conclusive position on the information he got from the very people who the gentleman is accusing for torturing him. How could that be fair? And he says that we cannot be going after what people put on social media. You have arrested the gentleman because he published something on the same medium. That one, you feel that if you make a criminal statement, between a criminal statement of alleged treason and a torture, in a democracy, I can tell you, the torture is even worse. Because the purpose for democratic governance, one is to ensure civil liberty so that you can have the wheels of democracy grinding very well. Now, when liberty is shredded, then you cannot be talking about democracy. And we live in a democracy. We are not living in a military dictatorship. And that is why I am disappointed the position he has taken. I am not saying that he should conclusively agree with what Oliver said, But what I'm simply saying, get all the facts. And don't we think that an allegation of torture warrant serious investigation? Now, another statement he made, which I didn't know whether I should cry or I should laugh. When he said that if Oliver is saying that the conditions that he was subjected to, he was isolated for that condition, then he cannot be talking about torture. It doesn't matter whether other people went through that and decided not to speak. Oliver has spoken. And in any case, he has a platform that the multitude of people who are going through same conditions do not have. So how better is it to make it known to the people of this country so that we can all work together in finding solutions to this? And I can tell you, this is not the first time we are having some of these allegations being made. You remember Honorable E.T. Mensah when the NDC lost elections in 2000? And he made a statement which had nothing to do with disturbances in this country. He was a member of parliament and a leading member of a political party. He was arrested and kept somewhere. I guess he would have described that as a torture. So who determines whether someone is tortured or not? I can slap you and you won't see anything wrong with that. You can think it's a joke. But you can slap another person and that person thinks that, no, this cannot be a joke. So I'm saying that as a minister, he's a person, to be very honest, I like him so much. Let me be very honest. But I didn't expect him to make the statements that he made. Another very important point, which I think ought to be reiterated, when he said that, yes, he's commending, you think, I guess the Pentecost Church, for providing a prison. We all need to commend them. It is the responsibility of the state, to improve the conditions of the prisons. And I'm not blaming only this government. Successive governments, I don't think that we have done much in improving the conditions at the prisons. Those young men and women who are incarcerated are still citizens of this country. So the conditions under which they are incarcerated should be a concern to all of us as a people. And that I disagree that we should just be asking civil society organizations, NGOs, and religious groupings or societies to be providing or improving the conditions. We need to take that serious. And let's begin asking ourselves, what has been the budget of the prisons every year under the Ministry of, I guess, Interior, right? What has been the budget line for those ministries? And I think that when we begin to interrogate, we'll begin to understand whether governments are giving some attention or seriousness to it. Anytime any politician goes there and comes out, or anybody such as Oliver, they will come out and tell us the conditions that Ghanaians are subjected to. We discuss it, and that ends it. And I can bet my last penny. The next day when we have another person, they will raise, who has a platform, they will raise this issue, we will discuss it, and that ends it. This time around, we all need together to push it. And perhaps from Parliament, some of us may begin looking at ways by which we can force the state to improve those conditions. We need to do that.
Are you going to put, private members bill, or maybe file an urgent question? What are you going to do?
One, I will file an urgent question, one. Two,
on the back of this? On the back of this specific case?
Yes, on the back of this. Because if the gentleman is alleging the conditions under which they are subjected, the moment Parliament will return, I will file an urgent question. The Minister for Interior or Minister for Justice and Attorney General must come and explain why, Ghanaians are subjected to that unacceptable conditions. And perhaps get a member of the committee that is responsible in this, and we'll begin working on a private motion bill to ensure that there is some improvement in the conditions of our prisons. And I'll tell you one thing. In Tamale, and permit me just a minute. During the elections, I visited the Tamale prisons. The prisons form part of my constituency. I was flabbergasted the conditions that these prisoners were. I had to provide them with even nose masks. They didn't have. I had to provide nose masks. I had to provide some sanitizer. And President Mohammed's son, he has a foundation. He provided them with a lot of things. I'm saying that we all need to look at it. Go to the Tamale prison. I would challenge your reporters there. Even the rooms, go and check the zinc. I believe that those things, the roofing sheets. I believe those roofing sheets were put at the time when the prison they are leaking. The fact that those people are convicted doesn't make them subhuman, because conviction is to correct people. We have seen people
to rehabilitate them.
Yes, we have seen people who came from prisons and they become scholars. We have seen people who, as a result of prison, they become imams, they become pastors. We have seen people who, as a result of their incarceration, they become contributing significantly, changing the conditions of people who are not in prison. We all have a collective.
So that point is made, and at least you're going to follow up.
We will do that
in Parliament.